Hey guys, Tomboy601, and today, welcome to Best of the Line Episode 2. If you weren't around for Episode 1, quick synopsis, though you could go back and watch that first episode. I have way too many boats, and my organizational method for them has been, if I sort of like a boat, I hit favorite. Well, that's built up a lot over the last couple years, and we need a different way of organizing. So we're going line by line in picking my favorite tech tree and my favorite premium ship from that line. While we do that, we are talking everything you need to know about that line, including basic builds, commanders, consumables, modules, all that good jazz. So if that sounds good, stick around, because today we are covering American heavy cruisers, and we're doing this line split by split because I think there are definitely enough ships to cover for each side. So the American cruiser line, it splits at tier 5. Prior to the split, the American cruisers have 152 millimeter guns and torpedoes. Once you hit tier 5, the split occurs. The light cruisers keep their 152s but lose torpedoes. Then what we have today, the heavy cruisers, well, they get good old 203 millimeter guns with improved pen angles. And first, before we talk about those guns, let's go over a little bit of a misnomer that I know a lot of people think. When they hear heavy cruiser, I think people think about the armor. They're like, oh, it's heavy cruiser, it's more heavily armored. No, heavy cruisers are more heavily armed, i.e., when you see a heavy cruiser, that means the gun caliber that it is firing is going to be larger. So today, the heavy cruisers for the Americans, like I said, they fire the good old 203 millimeter gun, and they are all about their guns. They lose out on torpedoes, but they also have what's known as super heavy AP, which means AP is what you want to be using as much as possible in these guns. And what makes super heavy special is going to be the penetration angles, and we're going to get a little technical here, so please stay with me. For most guns, they begin to have a chance to ricochet, i.e. a chance to bounce and not do any penetration damage when firing AP at 45 degrees, and they guarantee a ricochet at 30 degrees. For the American guns, they are improved to the point where they begin a chance to ricochet at 30 degrees, so they get 45 or 15 more degrees of guaranteed penetration, and then they guarantee a ricochet at 22.5 degrees. So you have about 8.5 degrees more room to have a chance to get a full penetration, which is going to do damage. Great. Awesome. That's why these cruisers are very powerful. It's because of the AP that they fire. As sort of a balancing factor, it is an exception usually to see these ships equipped with torpedoes. They're all about the guns and a little bit about the armor. So as far as the expected gameplay loop, how you should be playing these end up being sort of support vessels. You should be playing these near islands, either using them as cover or using them in a way to block one side of your ship, either sitting completely behind that island and firing over the island, or sitting just at the edge and having basically your nose poking around the island. One other kind of nice factor with these cruisers is they do tend to be, I'm not going to call it heavily armored, but they are well armored and usually pretty thin. And also their main guns are usually in a forward superposition where 2/3 of the firepower is off the nose. So what does that mean? Well, you want to play these ships kind of nose in if possible, kind of right up against islands. That's going to be your best chance to sort of dodge fire, but also be somewhat protected from anything else. As far as consumables go, you're of course going to have the good old damage control party. You know it, you love it. Cool, that's a basic part of the game. Your first consumable generally is going to be a choice between either sonar or defensive AA. You should be picking sonar pretty much all of the time in these vessels. Duration on them is going to be around 100 seconds, give or take, on the ship. It's going to be the American sonar, so 4.4 kilometer detection on ships, 3 and change on torpedoes. Then the next slot is where things get pretty spicy. For the lower tiers, basically 6 and below, you're going to have a fighter plane available to you, so that can do some spotting over the island for you if you're kind of hugged up against an island. Or once you hit tier 7 and up, you have a radar. And this is the other very powerful thing that the American boats have, is the radar. Radar is very powerful in this game, and the Americans have a pretty good one. 30-second duration with a detectability range of 9.9 kilometers, meaning if you can kind of play up close to caps, you can cover a full cap circle with it. You can provide spotting for your team when there is a concealed destroyer in the cap or when there's a smoked up destroyer. The American boats both have the ability to pump out damage with their guns, but also be a key piece of utility for their team. Commanders that you're going to want to run on these vessels, well, my go-to pick for the heavies is going to be Victor Einstein. He's a hybrid commander that is an event commander, i.e. he's a Halloween commander. They put him on sale sometimes during the year. I especially with the American lines, because we'll cover this probably next week with the light cruisers, because of the way the commanders are set up, I think Victor Einstein is a very good purchase, just so that you have differentiation between who would be your light cruiser commander and your heavy cruiser commander. Because so for Victor, what we're going to do is basically build him totally for the heavy cruisers. His inspirations that we are using are going to be Von Essen and Riegerwald. Von Essen improves the AP angles even more, so they just notch it up just that little bit better. And then Riegerwald boosts AP and reload time, which is just nice to have. Then as far as skills go, we're running Ingenious, Intuitive, Punch Through, and Fixated. Intuitive is going to give you a RGA, a kind of little halo as to tell you where the nearest ship is. And Intuitive is going to let you know just how close, just how many people are aiming at you. If you're a free-to-play person and you don't have Victor unlocked quite yet, my recommendation then would be Norman Scott. And he's also the one who I'd end up probably recommending over on the light cruiser, so it gets kind of hard because the build is a bit different. But if you're using him for the heavy commanders, my recommendation is going to be Makawa and Von Essen. Makawa is going to help increase, it's going to help with your concealment on the ship, and then his base trait is going to help with shell grouping. Then the skills I would run with him are Beyond Range, Igniter, Punch Through, Fixated, and then his legendary skill is going to be Fully Packed, which will get you an extra charge of that radar if you are using it on a tier 7 or higher. As far as your standard build mod slot wise for these vessels, what I would recommend is first using Aiming System Mod 1 in the first slot, Engine Mod 2 in the second slot, Concealment Mod in the third slot, and then Main Battery Mod 3 in the final slot. And of course, depending on what tier of ship you're in, you may or may not have access to those mod slots. So with all of that said, what are our picks? And for the tech tree, I don't think there can be any other pick but Des Moines. I know you're gonna be like, Tommy, Des Moines a premium. Not really. For this series, I'm considering the legendary ships as part of the tech tree lines, just because a lot of them now require up to tier 8 in order to unlock them, so they are the natural progression of the line. So that's why we're picking Des Moines, and you can't like, there's no way it's not this ship. Des Moines defines what a heavy cruiser is at legendary tier, and I don't think there's a better representation of what a cruiser is than Des Moines. It's just an incredible ship. AP and HE are equally deadly. You're able to fire every like 4.9 seconds with my current build, and you can get it up quicker if you're using the legendary mods. You have that fantastic radar. You have decent enough armor for the tier. You have the sonar. You have some heals. Like, Des Moines is the full package, and I think by and large, yes, it is the top of the line, but it is also just the best ship when compared to anything else around it at its tier. So that's my pick. It's not shocking because Des Moines is great, but don't worry. The point of the series isn't just to pick the legendaries every time. It's to pick what are both my favorite and what I think are the best. And now let's move on to the premium. And there are a ton of American premiums. But I like premiums that do something unique, that do something special. that have a fun quirk. And there is one American heavy cruiser that fits that incredibly well, and that's going to be Indianapolis. And before we talk about Indianapolis, we're going to have to go over the build we're using for it so you can better understand why we're talking about Indianapolis. So instead of the people we talked about earlier, Indianapolis really thrives when using Shelly Beepley. She's another Halloween commander. I know we're picking a lot of special commanders, but she is required to kind of make this work. Her base rate reduces fire chance. That's great. And then as far as skills go, we are running no fly zone, full speed ahead, armed and ready, which increases incoming dispersion, private zone, which is the big one, which boosts concealment, and then the legendary skill we are using is fully packed. And the reason we picked Indianapolis is because with this build, we get to stealth radar. What is stealth radar? Well, it's the concept that when your ship concealment is smaller than the range of your radar. This is a totally fun way to play. And yes, Indianapolis kind of struggles when she is in a tier 6, tier 7 match, but when she's in a tier 6, like an all tier 6 match or a tier 6, tier 5 match, it is just a ton of fun to play this ship. Her base concealment on the ship that we have right now is 9 kilometers. And then, as we talked about earlier, the radar that the Americans get is a 9.9 kilometer radar. So if you get spotted in the Indianapolis and you can't see any other ship that would be spotting you within that radius, you can hit the radar button and you will spot whatever's spotting you. And generally, when something has a below 9 kilometer concealment range, it's generally going to end up being a destroyer that you can then blap with your big ol' 203s. It is a ton of fun to play. It is definitely a ship you have to be cautious and understand which engagements you want to pick and where you need to be positioned. But really, that's the American line overall. The armor, while good, isn't the best. So you need to know where you need to position to hit the broadsides, or if you don't have broadsides, when to switch over from AP to HE, when to kind of press on someone to try to get a permafire put on them. Like, things like that are what make the American ships really good and one that you can excel at and are a great kind of foundation for learning how to play cruisers. So those are my 2 picks, guys. Standard for the tech trees, Des Moines. For the premiums, Indianapolis. This week, we don't have any honorable mentions. There are a ton of American premiums. There are a ton of versions of Baltimore. Anchorage is fun, but I think for my doings, these are the 2 that I'm picking. And guys, let me know down below, what are your favorite American tech tree and premium ships, or just your favorite American ships? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, if you like the video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. See ya.